Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board, members of the staff, and thank you for joining us today. Today we have our first meeting of Building and Fire Board of Appeals 2015, and as you guys know, this board does not meet regularly, and we only meet on as needed basis and when there is a new business. So with that, can we please have the roll call?
Sure. Board Member John Tatulian.
Present.
Board Member Michael Chukmajian.
Present.
Chairman Kishishian.
Present.
On to item number 2.
Yes.
Report regarding the posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on Friday, February 13th, 2015 on the bulletin board outside City Hall and on the city's website. On to item number 3. Presentations and commendations. Today we have none.
Okay.
Item number 4, approval of minutes dated October 23rd, 2013. A special meeting was called that month.
Not at all. Everything is good to go. Please. Oh, I have to wait. No, I think you have.
Could be any.
Buddy?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I would like to entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Okay.
I'll second it.
thank you.
Okay, item number 5, oral communications. Today we have none. On to item 6, old business. Today we have none. And on to item 7, which is new business at 420 West California, case number BMOD 1500888.
This case is for 420 West California, an appeal of the building official's determination that a permit does not exist for the establishment of an additional dwelling unit located at 420 West California. After discussion, you will be able to entertain a motion either supporting the building official's determination that a permit does not exist for the establishment of an additional dwelling unit located at 420 West California, or item 2, a motion overturning the building official's determination that a permit does not exist for the establishment of an additional dwelling unit located at 420 West California and establishing the structure as a legal duplex. Also here to present his case is the appellant Suraj Mezarkhani.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, city staff. First, let me thank you. I know your time is valuable for putting time in reading the materials that I've submitted and being here this afternoon. I really appreciate it. As sure you're aware, having read some of the materials from the introduction, the issue today for me is whether or not I can establish, and I'm hoping that I could successfully do so, that the unit 420 and a half, which is an attached unit behind the 420 West California dwelling, was permitted, and was permitted a long time ago. I think there'll be no disagreement between myself and the city that the structure is, but whether or not it's an actual separate dwelling, the 420 and a half, is the question, and the question arises only because of the issue of the kitchen, or existence of a kitchen there. So I'm going to be addressing both the issue. In fact, something just came up having first read the city's response to my brief this afternoon. I didn't know it was online, so I hadn't read it. The issue of the kitchenette, quote-unquote, the word itself, and of course the historical background that I was asked by the city kindly to look into so that they can, in fact, be more informed in making the determination that eventually the city made. So I'm going to kind of start from in a chronological process, hopefully that makes sense to everyone, because there's a lot of information on the tangents, and see if I can narrow this down. Now, having read the city response and speaking previously, there is no question that the city does destroy records, has destroyed records, original at least records, of a lot of permits and plans for pretty much all other residences until I believe I understood from the response in year 2000. So the city apparently could not find a permit for the kitchenette. And I think, as my research at least shows something the members of the board are aware, a dwelling is not considered a separate independent dwelling unless it has, and reflect also in the response, sleeping quarters, sanitary facilities, and a cooking facility. Now, the cooking facility, what it means, I'm not sure, but that means I suppose you can cook something. And the fact that that location has been used as such, and when I purchased it, I in fact did my research and pulled the permits that was available with the city, did my research in terms of the title. Everything shows that 420 and a half existed since 1954 or prior to that. The demarcation point is 1954 because we actually see it on a application for a permit for sanitary, which is bath and toilet and shower, for the same unit. I submitted the plan, which also city has, that small unit in the back shows in fact the bedroom, separated by a wall and a door, where the bathroom is going to be, which is part of the bedroom, as well as you enter into the structure, the back dwelling, it says kitchenette. So it was odd for me that in 1954 a plan was submitted for a kitchenette, for a bathroom that does denote a kitchen area, albeit kitchenette, but somehow neither before that point nor after that point we find anything as a permit for that particular kitchen. So I set out to find out if there was one, why not, and how we can, using extrinsic evidence and documents, as city calls it, historical documents, to see if we can establish one was there, but we don't have it 64 years later, because quite honestly, I wasn't a custodian of records of permits for the last 64 years. I don't think, respectfully, any of the owners, unless they're the original owners from 50, 60 years ago still today, that might possibly have a copy of a permit from 60 years ago. So to start, city talks about, well, it is there a kitchenette. The word is on that permit. I think it's 40117 and from 1954, but that in itself would not have triggered the city or the inspector or the planning department to ask or inquire permit requirement or something that would draw the owner or the city itself for some sort of a permit record. That, to me, has a couple of flaws. First, the word kitchenette, as the city wants to make it small, in the sense that it's a kitchenette. We don't know if there was actually a cooking facility. Again, respectfully, the word kitchenette merely by definition means a small kitchen. It doesn't tell you whether it's has cooking facility or doesn't have cooking facility. But in fact, I had no idea that this would even come up in the city's response. I'd asked my daughter to take a couple of pictures of the kitchenette. I didn't bring that many copies because I didn't think it would be relevant, but I think today it's important that I have a copy for the city. May I ask the board members to share? It's two views, one left, one right, of the actual kitchen unit. It's kitchenette because it's really small. It has the cabinet, just because it's a small unit. It has a range stove, it has proper sink. The plumbing was there, I think, 54 years ago for this to be there. There's fridge, everything that, I mean, it's really not much smaller than my kitchen, to be honest, at the house. But it does have the facilities required to be a kitchen. More importantly, I suggested to the city that it is odd to have as indicated, for someone who's asking for plans and permits to build a bathroom facility, to put something that is not there. In fact, triggering the city to ask questions. So it was either there to write the kitchen area, it says kitchenette. Or if it wasn't, one wouldn't mention if one did really want to build a kitchen without a permit. Someone who's actually taking a permit for a bathroom, you would think would have asked for a permit for a kitchenette. It's not a big deal, but it's there, it's mentioned. City is on notice. When I brought this up, the city indicated that, well, our inspectors, when they go to inspect a location for a particular project, they don't look at anything else. They go to see if that toilet, bathtub, shower is properly done so they can, what's the word, give a completion. Mm-hmm. And I thought, that's a bit odd to me, because I'm here before you on a simple phone call from a tenant who wasn't paying rent, whom I served an unlawful detainer complaint, and she turned around and made a simple phone call to the city complaining that her shower tub isn't draining properly. Well, I guess what? Mr. Soler is a very nice man. I've met him 2 or 3 times because of this. Went to check the shower tub. Came out with 3 pages of several violations from places I don't think anybody would go. That goes to show back then and today, city permits are important, structures are important. When an inspector goes in, doesn't walk through a kitchen area, because that's where actually you walk into the unit. You go up the stairs, it's to the right. The concrete pad was already built, this place was there. You walk in, the first thing you see is the kitchenette. You go to the doors to the bedroom and go through another door to the right to the bathroom area to inspect. Once you walk in and you see a kitchen on a permit plan, and you don't see anything, because in my case, they went and checked all the records for the same kitchenette, because they saw a kitchenette. Oh, I don't know about this. Yet, the suggestion is back then, when the person went in, didn't care about the kitchenette. So my theory has been, and I submit to you, that the kitchenette was either there, permitted, because if the city looked at it, didn't see a permit, I can't imagine, just like today, they would have let it go. Or perhaps it was added as part of the scope of this permit, but never added to it. And that reminded me of when I added the pool to my house that I live in today. You know, there's a red card, inspectors come and sign electrical, this and that. One day, when I had another construction, I had a letter that when we came to inspect the house as it was being remodeled again, that the pool doesn't have final. I thought it was. I mean, we've been swimming in it for a few years. So I came to the city. So we don't have any record of it. So unfortunately, I think I have the red card. I went, found it, that plan wrapped, brought it to them, and they realized, oh yes, everything is signed off, but the inspector never reflected it on the city records. This was years later. I think we had the pool probably 9 or 8 years before it came to their attention. I had no idea. How would I know? I mean, I get a contractor, does everything. I have the card, everything is signed off. I don't know what else needs to happen at the city. So I'm going back to the fact that the city can't find a permit. And I was told there's no permit with us. There was never any. And I thought that can't be the standard. We've got thousands and thousands of homeowners who have no idea what permits have come before them from previous owners. The custodian record, for all intents and purposes, is the city. But then we lose things. In fact, on Ms. Edwards' suggestion, I checked the plans on my property we're talking about. Guess whose plans are on city's website? My next door neighbors, which is actually a condo. So it shows all the 8 units. One piece of paper apparently is missing, because to be honest, I think this was permitted prior. But at worst case scenario, in 1954, this was before the city's eyes. The next thing I did, again at the request of the city, I thought it was proper. Trying to do what I can. Remember, this is a property right I'm trying to protect, which I've purchased and I think I'm entitled to, and I realize that I'm burdening you as the board, but it is something that I need to follow. I went to the assessor's office and had the impact supervisor come down because I could see the paperwork, but I asked the question because I could see in 1954, 4 months after this bathroom project, this 40117 permit was submitted to the county assessor's office, the property was reassessed, but not just because bathroom was added, because they would do it. They would get another few dollars from you. But in fact, in 1954, November, they reassessed the property, the structure, as 2 units, and it's there. I provided it to you. In fact, on one of the pages on the top says 420 and a half. They had no reason to do that. So either the kitchenette was there and the bathroom made it a unit, or together enough records was sent by the city. Now, city would have us, or at least the argument is and has been, that the assessor is a separate, entity. They're interested in collecting, and they'll charge you for anything. Well, I don't deny that. The problem with that argument is that assessor's office doesn't send anybody anywhere to check what's added, what's not added. Even if they did, they wouldn't see the bathroom. Strictly, that information comes from the city departments, where they send sufficient records of permits and so on, so that the assessor's office can actually make an assessment. So why would in November of 1954, assessor's office know anything about the bathroom or even decide that now it's a unit? I asked the supervisor there and said, well, the only way we consider and reassess any dwelling as a separate dwelling on its own, and in my case, they coded it number 3. In other words, there was 3 structures, because before that, above the garage was a permitted unit. Was if it has exactly the 3 things the city has indicated: a bedroom, bathroom, toilet facilities, and a kitchen. Without it, it can't. So if you see it there, that's what the records we have. I said, do you have any? Quite frankly, we don't keep anything. You're lucky that, in fact, under this, actually, a copy of it was copied. Most times it's not there. She suggested, and I don't know, that perhaps it was part of it, which is why I brought it up. Perhaps it was added to the scope of this work, but we don't have it. All I can tell you is back then, we considered it a unit. You've been paying taxes on it. It's been coded as number 3. And in fact, I found on the title, it's as such. And on my title, it says 420, 420 and a half, and 428. I pay for 3 units, taxes. In fact, but however, I'll come to this in terms of the Sanborn map, which is, I think Mr. Tom can weigh in at that. So, the records that I was able to pull tells me nothing other than the fact that the assessor's office and even the county recorder's office got some records from somewhere. And every research that I have done is that all of these come from the city. In fact, I noted, as this conversation came up back then, that there's a mailbox, 420 and a half and 428. The boxes are probably over 50 years old themselves. Mail has been delivered. So I checked with the post office. This is another thing that I added to my extrinsic evidence of possibility that there was something in terms of a permit. I made calls to even USPS postal office, I think in Missouri, and definitely talked to the center here in Glendale. They said to the extent that they can see, but they can't see how far back, because it's been such a long time, and they don't keep these records either, that there's been a mailbox and mail address, and we've delivered, and that's true, because since I've had it, it's been, and since I purchased it, the person who was actually living there was a 14-year tenant and had him, so at that was 18 years that I know of. But what was important was, in my research, I learned that the post office does not assign a mailing address unless they receive a record from the city, a certificate of occupancy or a permit. Otherwise, everybody can get it. We don't need mailboxes anymore. Just give an address and get one. And that's what I wanted to confirm with, and that was confirmed to me. I couldn't find within the city of Glendale requirement, but I think I provided a copy from the city of Los Angeles. They have a specific post office desk. So if someone comes and says, I want to add 420.5 West California, says, who are you? How do I know that place even exists? The only way that they do is a permit from the city. Now, it's easy, I suppose, 60 years later, said, well, back then inspectors didn't do this, and back then post office didn't care. I don't know. In fact, that would be presuming that nobody cared about the rules and regulations 60 years ago just because we're missing a piece of paper. But that missing piece of paper, which, quite frankly, I don't think is, after the evidence that I've provided, that should be an issue, has a very profound, it's like a blunt instrument at this point. With it, I have a property with certain rights. Without it, I don't. And the bluntness becomes even worse when you advance this 60 years from now. Because the suggestion was brought to me by Mr. Haghani, why don't we update it now? Permit it. I would have no problem. But he immediately realized. Do you realize how many new codes I have to meet? Worse of it, parking. It just would be impossible for me to have something that was permitted 60 years ago to have it meet all of the requirements unless the city waives them. But I think it will be difficult. I don't want to put them in that position. I think it's very easy from the record to see the fact that a permit either existed before 1954, city knew about it, otherwise this would not. We wouldn't be looking at the plans and permits that we have today. Or a permit is simply lost. I don't know where it is. I cannot answer that question if that comes up. If I may have a moment just to see my notes.
Please.
I wanted to touch up on the Sanborn map. I'm not very familiar with it, but it was brought up in our meeting with Ms. Edwards and Mr. Haqqani, and I wanted to know what it was. I really had no idea what it was. I made a note and looked. Apparently, it's a map used by the fire departments. It's an old map. It's been around for a long time, apparently not updated since 1970. Nevertheless, it's a map that, my understanding of doing my research, and board members may know this better than I, is used so that the fire department, when called upon, knows structures and dwellings. The city's position in our meeting was even the Sanborn map does not show 420.5. My reading of the map and the requirements of it, it deals with the structures. 420.5 is an attached structure it's part of a single structure. It just happens to be, call it the second plex of a duplex. A call from either one saying 420, fire department will have no problem finding it. A permit is not required to show on a Sanborn map for a particular structure, which is not an independent structure, to show on any Sanborn map. The next thing that I found out, and that's the map, is that while you can see the garages for everyone, but the garage is not considered part of the Sanborn map per se. And while 420A, which is the permitted unit above my garage, doesn't appear on the Sanborn map. The only thing that on Sanborn map appears is 420. Because it's the address. When somebody calls for a fire rescue, gives the main address. You tell 420.5 in the back, no one can find. So I don't believe Sanborn map really helps the city's argument here in supporting their position. And in fact, as I said, the flaw is that it doesn't show the 420A, and it's a permitted dwelling. It would not show the back unit because it's an attached structure. For all intents and purposes, when I pay my insurance, and actually I printed that, I pay 2 insurances for dwelling, and it's for fire, by the way. 420.5 and 420 are put together because it is one structure. one damages, everything is done, and one for the garage and the above unit. So I don't believe the board, while obviously can consider, should give any weight to the fact that perhaps some more map doesn't show 420.5. It doesn't need to. And so, having said everything, and I will defer to the board members for any questions, I believe that with all due respect to the city, the determination, while respectfully respected, is inaccurate. I think sufficient historical records are available to us, while one page isn't, if it ever existed, and I believe that perhaps it's just been lost after 60 years, that the unit was, or the kitchenette wasn't permitted, and because there's no kitchen, quote-unquote cooking facilities, the unit should be discarded and disregarded as a permitted unit, which it has been for a long, long time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
I have a question.
Sure.
You're showing 2 bedrooms here. How do you get into this unit in the back?
May I have that?
Let me get back to it.
And is there a connecting door between the bedrooms?
No, actually, if you look at the map, this is interesting that brings something up that I perhaps wanted to
Excuse
mention.
me, I'm sorry at this point. Maybe you presented the case, and thank you very much. At this point, maybe you should let the staff
sorry.
present their case, and then we'll go back, and of course, we're going to ask questions from you.
Sorry.
A lot of it, too. Yes.
Fine, thank
Please.
you. Okay. Going back to the staff report, in meeting with the appellant, we reviewed all of our records that we had on file, and to comment on one of his original conditions. We have all of the permit records. We do not destroy any of those. It is the construction documents for single-family dwellings that we did not keep. The state did not require that we maintain those records, those construction documents, on a permanent basis. And as a result, once the construction was completed, the construction documents were destroyed, leaving only the permit record for us to review. In looking at the permit record for this property, we did find the original permit for the original structure. We found the permit for the garage. We found a permit for a house moving, which we presume to be the apartment over the garage. We found the permit for an addition to that apartment and garage. We found the permit for the bathroom addition to this front structure. In looking at those permit records and the inspection cards that are part of the permit record, we did not find any reference to adding another kitchen, a kitchenette, adding a second range with a permit. And actually, if you will let me get to my record. The address pack. I apologize for the delay. I didn't get this set up before we jumped in. This permit issued in 1951, the scope, the address for it is for 420 West California, not for 420A West California. The scope of work is to provide an addition bathroom facilities by adding a 6'2" by 3'11" addition. And on the reverse of that permit was this sketch to show the location of the proposed bathroom, the fixtures that were going in the bathroom, basically gave a rough floor plan of the structure, and you see the note kitchenette there. In looking at the inspection card for this permit, you can see, you can see that it indicates under the plumbing that there's permitting 3 fixtures, and those would have been the 3 fixtures in the added bathroom. If you look under the wiring, where you have the line item for the range, that is left blank. It is not indicated that they're adding a range with this permit. With only the 3 plumbing fixtures, there's no kitchen sink. Based on these documents, based on looking at the Sanborn maps, which are in fact used by the insurance industry and the fire service, and not seeing it, the copy that we have is the version that was printed in 1970. There are updates of the Sanborn maps, or there had been updates of the Sanborn maps every 5 years or so. The city of Glendale currently only owns the 1970 version. So that gives us a snapshot of what the structures and their uses were on the property in the year 1970. It shows that front structure as having only 1 unit. Now, if I go to the Sanborn map, and let me bring that up specifically, you see that front unit is only shown with the 1D and the 1 address out in front. If it had been a duplex in 1970, based on these records, if you look at the property that's second from the corner of Columbus and California, you see where it has the front structure and it has a D and then a dotted line and then a D behind it. That indicates that it's a dwelling unit in front and a separate dwelling unit in back. And unfortunately, my printed out copy isn't legible at this scale. You see the little note, the little scribble behind the second one is the second address. On the property, 420 West California, you have that back unit. There is a little notation there. That notation is the address for that back unit. The front unit is only shown as being 1 dwelling unit with only 1 address. In trying to accommodate the request as much as possible, I did suggest we're not perfect. There could potentially be a missing document. Give me some kind of evidence of the missing document, and I will take that into consideration and perhaps revise my determination. I suggested that he go to the assessor's office and obtain the detailed records for the property. Prior to the adoption of Prop 13, the assessor's office had inspectors that actually went out into the field, measure what is actually out there, document what is out there, and assess taxes on what is actually out there, regardless of whether it was permitted or not. Excuse me one moment. In looking at the detailed records from the assessor, they show the permit number for the original dwelling unit. They show the permit number for the bathroom addition. They show the second dwelling unit with notations of field. They do not show a permit number to create that second unit. The permit that added the bathroom in the scope of work did not say to create a second unit. Add bathroom and kitchen to create a second unit. In the review of the records for the city of Glendale for the past 20 years, I see those kind of notations frequently. When these items are added specifically to create a second dwelling unit, those items are noted and that intention is noted in the scope of work. I did not see that in any of these records. I found no evidence, either in the trade permits, in the assessor records, in the Sanborn maps, in our records, to support the use, the determination that there was, in fact, a permitted second dwelling unit there. I have no doubt that there is a second dwelling unit there. The issue is whether it is there with a permit or without a permit. And that what is basically my determination, that I have no evidence to show that it was compliant and permitted as a second dwelling unit. The notation of the kitchenette on that, it's there. We don't know whether the inspector actually ever walked through it or whether he accessed that area from the exterior initially, and then once the framing went up, whether the inspector went through the main house. It was not part of the scope of work of the construction, so the inspector may not have paid any attention to that. And the fact that there is the use of a kitchenette may not have, at the time period, triggered any special response, much like somebody indicating a wet bar in a set of plans today would not trigger any kind of response or question that there's an attempt to create an intention to create a second dwelling unit. Basically, that completes the information that I have and the information that I reviewed in making my determination.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Edwards. So, board members, please go.
I think we all have questions.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Members of the board, if I may address a few things that Ms. Edwards said before you ask the questions, because it may answer some, it may not, but so that I've made my notes and can actually, while it's fresh in your mind, to bring those up.
I'm pretty sure those will come up.
Okay,
Kind
then I
of
will
questioning that
let
we
the board
have.
members ask.
You
And
will
if it
both have
doesn't,
you will
I will
both have
bring
an
it up.
opportunity to address. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I was asking about the access to this unit, and is that a door between the main house and this back bedroom?
In fact, that's what I wanted to mention. If you look at the plan very closely, there's an X drawn over the door. When this permit was being requested, it was part of the intention and told to the city through this plan that they're going to be closing. I think up until that point, it was perhaps a back unit, didn't have a bathroom, so while maybe in-laws were living there, it was not a unit, separate on its own. There's an X showing that the intention was to close that door off. The access to that unit, if I may, provide, again, so that there's no misunderstanding here, there's no question here that this is a permitted extension of the part of the house. It's whether or not this itself is a separate dwelling, meaning it has the three requirements: bedroom, which is separated by this wall. This is the door. It's still there. It was there when I bought it. They closed this door off and wanted to add this to make it a separate dwelling. This is a raised foundation. It was part of the house, and there's steps going on a concrete pad, and this is the entry. This is the only way you can enter the dwelling today. So they were closing this door off. They X'd it out. The inspector would have to go right through the kitchen, into the bedroom, and to the... Because I can't imagine, the city would say, what, are you closing this door? You can't do that. There's too much here, and I can understand. I mean, we are really, even the city is working on conjecture. We don't know. This might have triggered something. I just can't imagine based on the...
So there is no door there currently?
I'm sorry?
There is no door there.
There's no door there. It hasn't been, as far as I know, for at least the 18 years I mentioned.
Now, this back area where you just talked about bedroom, kitchenette, that's not an addition to the original house. That was part of the original house.
That's part of the original house.
Okay. So is it
I'm sorry, which one?
that this whole
The area that he's,
That is the dwelling we were doing.
this whole area?
Okay. Right.
Is it possible that the kitchenette was there from the original house? Is there a possibility? Is there any proof of that?
No, let me respond to that a little differently. And I think that's why I said I don't want misunderstanding. The city has permit, and they've accepted the fact that, and I think I've looked at it. In order to make this a separate unit, they extended the foundation, I think about 10 feet, to make this bigger so that the kitchenette can fit. If you go and look at it now, the the house was about here. They extended it. They put a concrete footing. They put the concrete steps up in order to extend this so that this unit can actually, otherwise it's too small.
Daroj, can we have you back at the mic because they cannot hear
Oh,
you
sorry,
at
I thought it
all.
was my turn.
I'm sorry.
So it was extended in order to create a large enough so that it can become an independent unit. And in fact, the kitchen, as you saw in the picture, sits mostly on the extended part of that property.
Now, is there's permit for that extension in these documents?
Yes.
No.
Oh, there.
This is the first time, as I said, I've tried from day one. When I met with Ms. Edwards, there is one, I don't know, I can't read these permits clearly, that there is no question. Otherwise, then we have a serious issue with the city inspectors in 1954 or whenever that was. A house is extended, the plan is there. They went and said nothing about a house being extended 10 feet. Now you go figure it out. But there was a permit, Ms. Edwards showed it to me, and in fact, that's why I keep repeating, because I don't want that to be an issue today here, because I can see that that structure is permitted. What we have a problem with is the kitchen. Now, of course, we just added something that I didn't think it existed. Because then my question would be, so the inspector went there, saw a complete new house added, concrete footing, concrete steps going up, and said, you know what, that doesn't trigger anything either. And that just doesn't make sense.
Do we have photographs of the house, the rear of the house, that area at all? Have any?
To be honest, I wish I knew that the question would come up. I would have brought it. I don't have anything with me.
Let me clarify something. We have the permit for the original house. We don't have a site plan with that permit. We just have the basic description that the dwelling unit is approximately 30 feet by 40 feet. We're presuming that this bedroom was part of the original structure, but we don't have exact dimensions from the original structure. Once that structure was constructed, the only other permit that we have in addition for that structure is the bathroom addition. The assumption during these discussions was that this kitchenette was converted from the bedroom area at some point in time. It was not identified as a later addition.
I have a question.
Please.
Ms. Edwards, you said that the city was not required to keep plans for single-family dwellings? Can you clarify that?
Yes.
So is this considered, my follow-up question would be, is this considered a single-family dwelling property or multifamily if there's 3 units on it? So where does this fall in relationship to keeping records or not?
Okay. The state does not require jurisdictions permanently maintain the records of single-family dwellings and duplexes. At this, and even today, they do not require that we may permanently maintain those construction documents. This structure originally was permitted as a single-family dwelling. The original construction documents would have been destroyed shortly after it was finalized. Since we have a separate structure with a separate dwelling unit in it, okay, that structure, those construction documents also would have been destroyed after that structure was finalized. The issue on this, and it goes back to your question, a triplex. The triplex, we do keep those records. But again, our permit record does not show this property as having 3 units on it. Our permit record only shows this property with 2 units. And at the time of the original constructions, each structure was a single dwelling unit. and therefore the state would not have mandated that we maintain those construction documents.
I do have one more question.
Please.
The other issue is the Sanborn map. I have familiarity with it. My question would be, the date, it's dated 1970, I think you mentioned.
Correct.
So, how do Sanborn maps work? Is it a picture in time, or so? In 1951, did Sanborn start the maps being developed then? Maybe it was the dwelling was there before the map was done or afterwards. When did they start doing Sanborn maps? Is basic my
Sanborn maps were started in the 1800s, late 1800s. I personally have copies of some Sanborn maps for another property in the city of Los Angeles, dated 1895. As I said previously, they are updated fairly regularly, approximately at 5-year intervals. Unfortunately, the city of Glendale only owns the 1970 version. Currently, Sanborn maps, I don't believe, exist with current dates. Technology, just like with the Thomas guides, technology has overrun them, and they are no longer considered the up-to-date method of finding out what's currently there. So as you look at the Sanborn records, they give you a snapshot of what existed at the time that Sanborn map was created. Looking at our record, as late as 1970, the Sanborn map did not show a second dwelling unit. Whether it was there originally, removed, and then put back after 1970, that snapshot doesn't show. But in 1970, that structure was only a single dwelling unit.
And their data is received by, how did they put the map together?
Field inspectors.
Field inspectors. That
went out and observed what was in the field. And they are fairly detailed. They give a lot of information on the type of construction, what the uses are, just a number of different things, the roofing, finished roofing material, all of that in order to better assist the fire service and the insurance industry to properly assess the properties.
See, that's one of the reasons why I was asking for a photograph, because if somebody just walks back there, I wonder if that would look like a separate unit or if it'll look like the back door of a house. So that would be kind of hard for a field inspector, in this case, maybe to tell the difference, as, you know, I mean, again, I don't know what that looks like. I'm just assuming.
I was making a note on, because we don't know this was done, we say until 1970. I don't know what's there. Is an inspection of my property 1970 or 1915? Was it updated? But certainly even today, if you went, you think it's the back door to the house. You're not going to be able to tell. If an inspector goes in, it's one structure. They're not, and I don't think they look at dwelling, but as I also added, with respect to the different properties Ms. Edwards mentioned, my unit, permitted unit above the garage is not mentioned on the Sanborn map. It's just shown as a garage, not a dwelling, but it's permitted and people live there. If it catches fire, people won't call for 420A. Just like the permits, everything is under 420 because that's the main address for the place. If that were the case, the people above the garage or back couldn't get mail because everything would be 420. That's just for ease of process. We are talking about specifically at the back, whether or not a kitchen was there at what point in time. Now, as I said, the only demarcation we have is the 1951, I believe, if I'm made a mistake, 51 or 54, I get confused now, there's so many dates. That shows. And as I said, it even shows that the intent was to block that bedroom door entrance, to separate it. They put concrete porch with stairs as an entry. It does not, again, It is very, I think, the more members are aware, the city's aware. This is 64-year-old record. We're trying to guess, conjectures. We only have what is available to us. Considering the negative effect of saying no today, it's very easy to say, well, why don't you use it as a in-law unit? My in-laws are not here. I'm being facetious a little bit, but the facts are facts. I can't undo everything that is there simply because a piece of paper is missing. I also take issue with the assessor. The city of Glendale takes revenue from the assessor's taxes collected on property taxes and gets it quite rightfully. We all need to. That's what we pay for, and city needs to take advantage of. Now, we pay it to the city assessors. We don't pay it directly to the city. But it's for the benefit of the city and its residents. To accept, and it's right there, that the front unit, it says structure 2 units and above garage 1 unit. You take that as a given, we'll accept the taxes. Taxes for 3 units are being, collected. But then the same document is not good enough to show that it's actually 3 units. The city assessors, which we're counting on, has considered my property 3 units. If for nothing, we should take comfort in the fact that at least an independent entity considers it 3 units. Does the fact that we don't have a piece of paper saying there was a permit put me in, essentially, as I said, it's a blunt instrument I can't get out of.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry. When did you buy the property?
2011.
And you bought it as a 3-unit?
I bought it as a 3-unit. The title shows 3-unit. I pulled all of the permits. That's before you and the city has permitted. And because that was part of the permit and the plan, I could not, for the life of me, believe that a documented, as you can see, kitchen just would be. For nothing, city was on notice in 1951 of a kitchen. That's all we can take, must take from it. We don't know what happened, but the document was sitting there. As a person who's buying today in 2011, all I can go is what's available to me and the city. 4 years, 5 years later to tell me, by the way, we can't find another paper that says that was permitted is, I don't want to use a draconian measure, but it essentially becomes, because we've got 64 years of code changes, that it's impossible to meet today.
Do you guys have questions? Okay, well, I do have a series of questions, both from you and from the staff. I'm not in a position here to reinvent the wheel, and nor is my intention to go back and look at every one of these, but I trust that staff has already done the review of this. However, I just want to verify a few of them with you, just for a matter of clarification and for this board to make an informed decision on this. Let's go back to very first original permit on this property. I draw your attention to permit issued on July 2nd, 1924. Very beginning, exactly. It's the right, the stack of the permits. I apologize. We have a stack of information here and exhibits that we have to go through, and it's not very easy to search those. But it's very in the very beginning. It says 1924. In the bottom of the page indicates the date.
I don't have that one.
Mr. Chairman, is it part of my exhibits or the city exhibits? I
This
don't think I
is
put
what
everything
I
in.
have in my possession from the city.
I'll take your word. I've seen
This
these.
is the original. I trust. Well, I assume that you already made copies of all the permit records, and this is, Ms. Edwards. Is this everything that's available for this property?
Yes, that's
Okay.
everything in the entire address packet.
On the entire address pack, this is all that's available. Okay, so I'm referring to the original building permit, Mr. Hani.
Yes.
And in 1924, a permit was pulled. It says purpose of the building, dwelling and garage, way on top, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay,
Correct.
that was 1924, and the size of the building was 30 by 40. First question, wasn't the city in the practice of issuing separate permits for separate structures at the time?
No. You're talking about a separate permit for the garage,
Yes.
separate from the house. That practice did not begin until sometime in the 60s.
Okay.
A number of our permits from the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s all indicate dwelling and garage, with the detached garage being a separate structure, all as one permit. That was very common in those decades.
Okay, so in 1924, there were two structures built with one permit, dwelling and garage, detached garage. Later, in I think the next document is 1945 when this.
Right
You
before it.
mentioned something about a moved building. Could you tell me where that permit is that a building was moved to this property?
Yes, it's permit number
It's before 24, actually.
12099, issued on 9/4/1924. About the time they were completing the construction on this, there was the house moving permit. House moving permits are not technically building permits. They're a separate permit.
I'm sorry,
And
we said words. Which permit was that again? 1924 you mentioned?
yes, 9/4/1924. Let me see if I can find it in my
I
packet
don't
here.
think we have that one.
I just saw a house moving somewhere.
Yes, you basically see the inspection card rather than a
Oh, yeah.
permit. Like I said, house moving were not really building permits. They were special permits. We have this noted. It shows as having been moved from 136 North Kenwood to 420 West California. That unit, that house moving, is assumed to have been the apartment over the garage.
Is it a normal practice to move a two-story building, an apartment, over a garage to a new address?
I don't know that the original structure was one-story or two-story. Two-story structures have been commonly moved.
So we assume this garage was already there because we established in 1924 a detached garage was built. And then we're assuming that this moved building was a building that went on top of the garage?
Correct.
And was that the city's practice at the time not to ask for any kind of building information, how this garage is going to hold up a building above?
As a house moving, yes. There was no,
Well, I
this is the
understand the
only
house
permit
moving.
at the time, the only information that was provided by the city at the time, that era, for this type of situation.
Well, why are we assuming that house moving permit was for a moved building to go on top of a garage, as opposed to the back of this dwelling unit, which existed 30 by 40, and now extending it further?
Without that assumption, then the apartment over the garage is unpermitted.
But there was another subsequent permit for an addition.
For an addition to the apartment and over the garage.
Okay, and that
So the
permit,
only way that that could have occurred is if the dwelling, the second dwelling unit, was this apartment over the garage.
and again, the date for moved building was 19. When was that moved?
9/4/24.
19.
9/4/24. September 4th.
And the house and garage
Right.
were finalized approximately 30 days after this house move.
Say that again.
The original house and garage were finalized approximately 30 days after this house move.
So a permit was pulled for a brand new house in July of 1924, and
Ninth month, September.
in September, 2 months later, a building was moved to that same address, supposedly a two-story structure, or maybe assuming the garage was already there, this is going on top of that garage because they already have a permit for the garage. And so far, we haven't been able to establish any permit for the addition to the rear of the main dwelling, 30 by 40 dwelling, which in fact, that's the only record that's pretty clear to me. It's a 5-room dwelling, permitted 30 by 40, clearly matches the plot plan. But we have no record how that addition was ever made to the back of the house.
Correct.
And we believe that moved building was not to the back of this house.
Correct. The other reason why I believe the moved building was not to the back of the house is that back of the house, the moved building, the moved house would have included restroom facilities, sanitary facilities, and there's no indication of that. In fact, they added a restroom in order to be able to have a second restroom in the building.
But the restroom addition permit that they pulled, wasn't that for that same purpose, to add a restroom to that unit?
Correct. If that house moving was a complete dwelling unit, there would have been a bathroom, there would have been sleeping, and there would have been a kitchen. We only have sleeping and the kitchenette. There is no bathroom as part of that original wing at the rear of that. So it would have been, it's an incomplete, it's not a house.
Right, and the bathroom addition was made in 1951.
Correct. So the determination in my reviewing the documents was that that house move was to create the apartment over the garage.
Is it possible the moved building was a two-story building already, a garage, and because I don't know how you will move a garage, by the way.
It is possible, but would have been unlikely. It makes more sense that they would have taken a small single-story house that they moved and placed it on top of the garage that was currently under construction.
Can I interrupt with, please don't lose your thought. In this packet that we have, there's some blank pages, but there's lines in it. Is it possible that, I mean, is this from the exact copy and it's not clear because we're talking about the moved house and then there's a page with some lines but not clear. Then you have another page, and then you have the same thing again?
Right. What you have are copies from the scanned documents, front and back. If the back page was blank, it's in there as a blank page. The few lines may be wrinkles in that, so that we have the assurance that we didn't miss copying the back side of the document and therefore are missing information. If the back side of the document is blank, we know we had no information there.
So if I'm looking at this permit, 1C, dated 8/29/1945, is the next page the back of that?
Yes.
So that means there was no plot plan that went with that. Well, actually, yeah, there is a plot plan that went with that. It shows the addition. Let's take a look at that. That's the next permit, actually. We need to take a look. The description. Sorry. It says, this is a permit I'm referring to August 29, 1945. And down at the bottom, it says present garage, if I can read this correctly. It says present garage and apartment above. So in 1929, August 29, this garage and the apartment above already existed. Isn't isn't this what that means? And it says to be extended back 9 feet. Ground floor and the laundry room, second floor. So August 29, 1945, yeah, they admitted this two-story garage and apartment structure existed, and they made an addition to the back. And still, we don't know how that addition to the main dwelling was ever made. Is that
correct? Correct. And at this point, this site plan shows the present front house. Okay, shows it as a rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that was just carelessness, because that was not the structure that they were obtaining the permit for, and was just doing a graphic representation, not accurate as to the size or shape.
Correct.
We can't tell.
Okay. So, Ms. Edwards, let me understand something. Is the city accepting this addition as a legal addition, even though permits cannot be found, and it's only the issue is the use of the unit as opposed to the structure itself. I want to understand this, what the appeal is for.
There is some question on the bedroom addition. However, because of the bathroom addition would have required some of that structure be exposed and for the inspector to take a look at it, we are interpreting that we are stopped from saying that that bedroom addition is unpermitted.
But that clearly was not is not mentioned in this appeal today, right? That is not.
Correct. That wasn't part of the reasoning for this. The issue is
just the use.
Correct. It could be used as a granny flat, a guest house, if you will, without making any changes. That use is not considered a separate dwelling unit and is not considered a separate rentable unit. However, in order to be considered a separate dwelling unit and a separate rentable unit, it would also have to have a full kitchen. And that is the crux of this whole issue, is without having a permitted kitchen, he does not have a permitted second dwelling unit in that structure.
The current zoning will allow for 3 units?
Yes.
Yes.
And if you were to just get this permitted, you would have a parking problem?
A multitude of issues, because as I said, it's a 64 years worth of code changes, but most notably, as it is these days with construction, it's parking.
Would your setbacks and everything else be fine per code today?
Everything is as it was. Setback is, yes, as I understand it, everything, and I don't think city has an issue with that. Really, the only issue is with kitchenette, it becomes a rentable unit, which is what I bought it for, as it was reflected in the title, and without it, I can't. I don't want to address, because perhaps you have more questions, some of the issues that has come up.
Fire access, is anything, I guess, for fire to happen in the back, it would be the same. I mean, nothing is preventing fire access, Mr. Stewart, Tom?
No, this particular building has all of the typical access around the structure that we would expect in a neighborhood of this vintage, whether or not the structure in question includes 1 legal unit or 2. All sleeping rooms are required to have a certain degree of emergency escape and rescue. That property and that particular block has ready access to reliable water supply in the form of hydrant space throughout the city, and there is adequate access for suppression crews to get on site.
And Mr. Stewart, do you think the access to this back unit through the kitchen, is that an acceptable entrance and egress from that unit? I'm not sure exactly how the kitchen layout looks like. We have some pictures, but still doesn't tell me exactly what the relationship of the door and the step is with. I cannot believe this small unit have a huge kitchen like that, 6 by 11. Is it possible the only portion of it is a kitchen?
It's not 6 by 11. As you enter, the door opens to
a dining area, maybe?
Well, yes, but it's small to put a dining
right,
table.
Breakfast
it opens
area.
Against the wall of the bedroom, which a closet protrudes out. And when you go in, it's an open area. The kitchen is to the left of the door,
right,
and quite about 1.5 feet, even past where the opening of the door. It looks big. Actually, it's pretty functional, usable kitchen.
So it's an L-shaped kitchen?
No, actually, it's only a kitchen against the wall.
Oh, okay, where the window is, towards the rear.
Exactly. And you
Okay,
look-
so it's just a counter against the window with a couple of appliances, and the rest it's open for entrance to the bedroom.
Yes, there's
and-
chairs, there's a, you know,
Looks like there's a window here that's not on.
There's another window on this picture that we don't see on
there's
this
two,
plot.
there's two windows in the kitchen area.
Oh, one is on the
is when you
steps.
face south, as you can see above the sink.
Right.
One's a smaller one, which is more of
this
a vent. My daughter's put plants, and
Okay.
she's staying there.
So this, I guess this unit has been inspected. Oh, by the way, another question before we get to that one. I do believe that, I forget what the name of the agency is. Don't we have an agency in the city that does inspect apartment buildings every year, or, and they go do random inspections or whatever, maybe scheduled inspections and see if there's any deficiency in units and notify the owners?
Under the Health and Safety Code in the state of California, R2 occupancies having 3 or more units are required to be inspected on an annual basis. But this particular structure would legally have either 1 unit or 2 units. So this building would be exempt under state regs, and so we would not inspect it on a regular basis.
Also, the City of Glendale does not have a separate housing unit that does inspections of all rental units. We do not have that in place at this time. And as far as I know, have not had that in place on a consistent basis for many, many years. Whether they had it in place at the time of this construction, I can't say.
Maybe I'm confused or I'm not referring to the right department, but isn't there a neighborhood services department maybe that does that?
Code compliance, neighborhood services, they respond to complaints, and that's actually what triggered all of this. There was a complaint, and there were a number of violations noted. Most of the violations have been corrected. One of the violations is to put this back to original condition or get this permitted as a second dwelling unit. That's what triggered all of this.
Okay.
Do we know what the complaint was for?
As I brought that up, it was I had a tenant there who didn't pay rent. As I said, I filed an unlawful detainer action. The day after she was served, she called the city complaining about the shower tub not draining. And by the way, my daughter, who has hair up to here, has never had complaint about shower drains since she's been there the last 6 months. But she complained, and that triggered an inspection. And yes, there was issues, simple, but nonetheless issues that, in fact, permits of plans have been approved. Just today I got them. I'll be getting the permits. Everything has been done. It's just a matter of doing the paperwork. This was obviously a significant because it affects the value, the value that I paid for it, the value that it has, the use of it. And I want to address a few things, unless Chairman Kashishian said you might have questions for me.
Please go ahead.
And you brought up something very interesting because it's obviously you're the experts, and that's where you said there. I hadn't noticed that. So I am kind of a bit confused now myself in terms of moving a house and putting it on a garage, which I cannot imagine, and I've done a few houses in my time, that would actually support a house on top of. A garage is made 4 walls with a roof for a car to go in.
Especially back in 1924.
1924. To expect
Sitting
that
on a slab only, right.
I wanted to put a second story. I can't imagine to tell you what the city put me through just to hold that up. We have substantial support just in order to put, again, 2 walls. Also, the unit above the garage is very small. I can't imagine that being a house because that was only 20, hardly 20 something. I mean, unless there were houses, but 15 by 20, so it's almost this. Only by extension that was permitted, it's a little bigger. I don't know if there was a bathroom or a kitchen as part of it, but why is it hard to believe that perhaps a part of a house was moved? A house nonetheless, but part of it, and put in the back of, because in fact, if you were to logically sit here and think which part of that move in fact ended up at this house, wouldn't it be more logical to think that in the back a concrete pad was prepared and put in the back, because it is a little extended, than on top of 4 pillars of a garage?
Well, I certainly would like to think that way myself, because that was, what I brought up, because I think probably that makes more sense. But then again, makes the other unit on top of the garage illegal, because they can't find another permit for a unit on top of the garage. So either way,
Which brings us back to the fact that there are records that may be missing. It happens to be mine. I mean, it happens. Somebody's
that's
gotta
exactly
get
what I
this.
was trying to establish here.
And again, as the Ms. Edwards mentioned, if that stops them from complaining about both the existence of the back unit we're talking about, or stops them from complaining, having permitted the rest of the unit above the garage, nonetheless, by virtue of notice, they're stopped 64 years later to force me to present a document I never had. I could not have had.
There's a document here, looks like 1951, and the house's shape is more accurately drawn out. Is this from the assessor's office?
Yes,
Is that what that is?
and that's part of the permit process also.
And then on the following sheet, when it says built date, there's 3 dates here, 1924, 1947, and 1951. Does that match up to permit dates?
That's a good point. I'm not sure. I've looked at these, but whether I can put them in a chronological order, I don't know. But we know 1951 is the issue that we're talking about today, because that's the last time we see, or the first time perhaps, we see.
And then there's a
So what were the
1947.
3 dates?
There's 1924, 47, and 51.
47 was the one that, oh no, the chairman was talking about.
And there's also a 1944 on, I guess we're looking at this as 2 different structures. Oh, 420 and a half.
Yeah, the 44 is this one, the 1C one.
Can you wait until I catch up to that page?
Yeah, it's all the way in the back.
Towards the back?
While you're looking at that, what was crucial for me on that particular document Mr. Chatmajan is looking at was that it says 2 structures, 1 2 units, 1 1 unit.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at right now.
Do we know how old this document is from assessor's office?
Well, I obtained it only throughout this process. I really don't know when it
Well, it
was.
says 51 on the bottom here.
But I believe it's 1950. Yeah, I mean,
Oh, yeah, I see. That could be something else.
Yeah.
that's the permit, that's the bottom, that's...
Ms. Edwards, I have another question. Could you educate us on how someone will obtain a separate address for a property today?
Today-
I'm sorry, not today. To the best of your knowledge, how was it several years ago?
What I see very commonly in the older permit record is that when an additional dwelling unit is permitted, that a separate address is assigned to it. Sometimes it is a temporary address, and I see in the inspection card where the temporary address is crossed off and the final address is added in. They may have temporarily assigned, instead of 420A, they may have temporarily assigned a 422, and then out in the field realized, oh, wait a second, the house next door is 422, cross that off and right above it 420A. And that is a common occurrence in this era of records. On these permits, I did not find any of that.
But where does one apply for an address change or adding an address to a property?
At this time, you apply through the building department, and we will do our research to confirm whether or not there is a separate dwelling unit, or if it's a guest house. Guest houses are not entitled to a second address, but if it is in fact a permitted dwelling unit, then an address would be assigned to it. In this era, it would not have been done by the building department. Addresses were maintained by the city engineer. And I have no knowledge of the record for an application in the era of this. I can only go by what I have seen on in the permit record.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may add, as I indicated, Mr. Chairman, it is, again, a 64-year-old knowledge we're trying to hopefully extract. When I called the City of Glendale main post office, a lady, Ms. Smith, who's the general manager, and according to her, she's been working there for 33 years. She said, that's the requirement as long as I've been here. But if I know, but based on my knowledge of being here 30 years, this has been the requirement since late 19th century. In other words, they don't just assign it. I mean, yes, I'm sure there possibly people put it there. Eventually, the postman who they knew happened to be, 64 years ago was a different life. They would have delivered you the mail, and an address may have by default and de facto established. But we're not talking about 19th century, we're talking about 1951 at earliest. And when I spoke with Missouri, they said the same thing. Unfortunately, they don't have any records, although I provided you. They also told me, they did a quick search, and they told me, you can go to the website, you can see it. If it's not a legal address, it will not pop up on our USPS website. Sure enough, 428 comes up, 420.5 comes up, and 420 comes up. And they said, if it's there, there must have been, based on the record that we know of, at least the last 100 years, without some sort of indication that this unit actually exists and it's permitted, they would not have assigned it. Now, as I said, I don't discount many possibilities, but the fact is it's been there. We have it, and we've got a lot more to add to it. As Ms. Edwards indicated, the past at least 30, 40 years, through the planning department, if there's not a permit, they won't issue it. Is it so hard to extrapolate that perhaps 50, 60 years ago was the case? As I have been told, now, they wouldn't give me any records, they don't have it. Because it specifically asked, is there something that you have that shows a permit was shown for this one? Says, we don't keep those permits for anyone. They just need to bring it. We make sure it's issued by the city, the veracity of the document, then we'll issue it. We don't keep it, we don't scan it, and this was 64 years ago anyway.
There's gas and sewer permits in 1944.
Yeah, well, that matches up with this year built in the tax assessor.
So you would
And there is sewer
by the way,
there is sewer connection
from
that unit.
Because you already have an existing house. That
May,
has a gas.
may I comment?
Yes.
The original structure was on a cesspool, and one of the documents in the packet shows the location of that. Later on, we have the permit for when they actually installed and connected to the sewer.
Yeah.
So that would take care of that, and at that time period, that permit to connect to the sewer may have triggered an inspection by the assessor's office of the property.
Is there also gas on that?
Yeah, there's gas on here and electrical. It says finish wire.
That could be a possible kitchenette date.
That also could have been as a result of the addition to the garage and apartment, which was in that era.
You had mentioned at the beginning, and please refresh my memory, that the neighbors' permits were on your property?
No.
How did you say that?
Actually, I only checked it because Ms. Edwards suggested, because there's a lot to scan, and you will find sometimes that they would scan somebody else's property plans and documents over onto and save it under somebody else's. I didn't think that would be the case. I was just checking to see what's available, because there is some interesting records of buildings on the city's website. I actually checked mine, and under my property, the plans of the next door condo townhouse units shows up. And from day one, when I asked for this purpose, the city to give me all of the plans for that they have, and a gentleman called and said, we have no plans at all for your property. we are pulling some permit plans, whatever we've got, and they sent it to me. So there's nothing on my property at all, and on the website at least, it's the next door. If I've looked at it correctly, I think I am.
Are there any more questions?
I'm exhausted of questions.
Okay, since we have a lot of documents here, exhibits and whatnot to review, at this time what I would like to do to request a recess of about 15 minutes for our board members to be able to digest this material, and we'll get back with you.
Of course. Thank you very much again.
Before the recess, I would like to make two comments.
Please.
One, in the house moving, please remember that that house move occurred while the original structure and garage were under construction. So it is possible that they were able to take advantage of something falling in their lap, an ability to add the apartment and adjust the construction of the garage accordingly, because that construction had not yet been completed. Also, please remember, assessor records are based on the assessor inspectors that went out to the field and measured what was there, whether or not it was permitted.
Correct.
So I just wanted to remind everyone of that event.
And believe somewhere in 1950s, an assessor has been to the site and apparently has seen whatever is out there, and they've documented it.
The permit for the bathroom addition would have triggered an assessor's inspector to go out.
Right.
The notes are there, and the date is approximately, if I recall correctly, approximately 2 months after the permit for the bathroom addition was finalized.
Okay. And the thing that's quite surprising to me, I mean, we have plenty of documents on this site, obviously, all sorts of permits, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, for almost everything they've done on this property, there is permit. Now, how come all of a sudden a permit for an addition, a huge addition of bedroom and a closet and kitchen and whatnot cannot be found? And why didn't this person initiate getting another permit with, and the gap that we're talking about is between 1945 to 1951. Within that period, this is when this structure appeared.
I cannot say. I don't know if the property changed hands multiple times in between, and someone in the middle added something and neglected to disclose that to a later buyer. I do not have ownership information to know that.
Or that could be part of the original structure? Do we think that could be part of the original structure?
Well, the application names are pretty consistent.
The owners' names are on the applications, and I didn't recognize. I think there's only 2 owner changes.
There's
Correct.
a garden.
The original owner owned it until, I think, even past
Years.
60s and 70s, and then Mr. Quintero bought it, and from whose children I bought it.
But please also, you did mention that there are a lot of permits. There are also a lot of permits that aren't there. I don't see a single permit for a single re-roof. And it obviously, over this time period, there would have been at least 1 re-roof, if not 3. And there is no permits for those in the permit record at all. So there is some missing where construction work was done and there's no permit to document that.
Okay.
I guess the question will be from 1951, am I responsible for not having that permit? I can understand if a roof was done without permit 15 years ago. Even then, of course, there's no issue here today. But it's the city's, I think, obligation to, in other words, if I came today and said I want all my permits and they didn't have it, who would I complain to?
Well, that's an interesting question. Let me answer that a different way. Obviously, you've done your due diligence before you purchase your property. You've gone to the city, you've requested the records and whatnot, and they've prepared everything that's available, given to you. And then after that, and that's excellent. I wish that everybody in this town would do that before they purchase a property. But when you obtained the records, did you initiate to speak with someone, or there an engineer, a planner, or someone? Or you just interpreted the records on your own and you came up to your conclusion this is a legal 3 units?
Well, I did more than just that. I did 2 things. I spoke with the broker, and who obviously I thought they have seen these things more than I have. And I also spoke, but more importantly, to the title people. And based on what I had pulled, which included these documents, going through the title records, the assessment code, because that's one of the key things when you're purchasing a multiple unit, is you want to know what the assessor is taxing it on. Because according to everyone who's an expert in this, is that you rely on the tax assessor's assessment of the property. Because everybody believes, and that's been the custom and practice for who knows how, I don't know how many decades, if not the entire past century to today, is that tax assessor's records come from the city. Tax assessor inspector, even if for the sake of argument in 1951, that triggered for them to come and take a look at the bathroom. Without seeing a kitchen there, they would not have designated in 1951 it as a separate unit. Structure number 1, 2 units, structure number 2, 1. So there was a kitchen there. Now, who is stopped from arguing that there wasn't, or was it a permit or not? I mean, you can't rely on the same document and with the same breath kick it. So you can't pull and, one hand and kick it the other.
Right, understood. But let me go back to my question again. Did you talk to any planner or plan review engineer at the city?
No one in the city.
Okay, so your consultation basically was with the broker and assumption that county assessor record is the most accurate record.
Yes.
And I hope by now you do realize that that's not the case, right? These are different entities, different departments, different. One is a county, one is a city. Okay.
Goes without saying.
Very well.
Which is why I'm before you.
So can we have that recess, please, at this time?
If I'd done that, I wouldn't be asking your address, but you're quite correct. From now on.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Sorry. Thank you. The board is back in session now. So we're just going to continue with a couple of more questions from the staff. Just for clarification purposes, again, Mr. Edwards, if you can please excuse us if you did not understand you clearly before. The issue before us here, if I understand it from this appeal request, it's the kitchenette in an unpermitted apartment unit with the understanding that the apartment itself, it's either permitted or not permitted, but the city doesn't have any issue with that, and that's a separate matter that's being dealt with?
Correct. The original violation based on the complaint included unpermitted bedroom, unpermitted kitchen. In reviewing with the city attorney, they have indicated that they will probably make the determination that the bedroom will be considered as basically legal due to the fact that had it been challenged at the time of the bathroom construction, which opened up the construction of a portion of that bedroom and is attached to that construction. Since the city did not challenge the permitted nature of that bedroom at that time, that they will consider us as stopped from being able to rule that that is an unpermitted and therefore not legal construction. They have not issued that in writing at this time. However, that is still one of the outstanding violations that needs to be finally addressed.
So whether this board finds this kitchen or kitchenette or whatever you want to call it, legal or not legal, has no bearing on the unit itself. That's still a subject matter to be determined by city attorney's office?
It may, or it may not. I really can't. The other, in previous cases similar to this, the attorney has basically ruled that we lost our ability to challenge the permitted nature of the structure when we finalized the permit for that bathroom addition. So that makes this determination, this ruling, important.
Okay. Ms. Edwards, is there a formal definition today for the difference between a kitchen and a kitchenette?
Not that I am aware of. It's just a diminutive form to indicate something less than a full kitchen. But there's no formal definition that I've encountered.
But doesn't necessarily mean a kitchenette shall not, for instance, have a cooking facility. There's no interpretation like that or definition like that, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Board members have more questions? All right. At this point, I'd like to entertain a motion either in support of the building official's determination that the permit does not exist for the establishment of an additional dwelling unit located on 420 West California, or a motion overturning the building official's determination that the permit does not exist for the establishment of an additional dwelling unit at 420 West California.
I would like to entertain a motion overturning the building official's determination that a permit does not exist for the establishment of an additional dwelling unit located at 420 West California and establishing the structure as a legal duplex.
Second that motion.
Yeah, I will support and second that motion.
Thank you.
May we have a roll call to make it
Please.
official?
Yep.
Okay. Board Member Michael Chakmajian.
Here.
Board Member John Tatulian.
Are we answering yes or
Yes.
no?
It's a roll call present.
Yes.
Yeah. And Chairman Eric Kashishian.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Item 8, to move on, reports, information only. Building activity reports for June 2014 and December 2014.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Members.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, I would like to bring your attention to the June 2014 monthly income summary. This is basically information only since it's been so long since our last meeting. This represents the conclusion of the fiscal year 13-14. And if you will look at the second column from the right, the current year to date, about a couple inches down, the subtotal column A line, building and safety's income based on permit activity was $6,275,317 for the year, which was approximately $500,000 more than the prior year. These numbers are indicative that we are moving out of our recession and are bringing in very healthy incomes for our operation. If you go down to the bottom of the page where it says the line item total, again, that second column from the right, the current year-to-date total of all of the income for building and safety was $7,795,818. This dollar amount is actually a record for building and safety. It surpassed the high number that we had prior to the recession by about $200,000. So the amount of construction activity in Glendale is back to the pre-recession levels. The reverse of that page is the building activity report. If you will go approximately 2/3 down the page, we have the dwelling unit summary. You can see where the year to date we had 11 new single-family dwelling units and 767 apartment units permitted for the year. So that's where the majority of our income has occurred. Moving on to the December 2014 monthly income summary. That gives us the basically halfway point of the 14-15 fiscal year. Again, if you look at the subtotal column A line and the current year to date, we are at $3,123,937, which is just slightly under the previous year to date for this same time period. And if you look at the building activity report for December, you see that the dwelling unit summary, we have 6 brand new single-family dwellings permitted, 336 apartment units, 141 apartment units in a mixed-use building, so the ground floor would be commercial, for a total of 449 dwelling units permitted so far this fiscal year. Based on the income that we've received, we're on track to essentially equal the income that we brought in last year. Also, if you look at the very bottom right corner where there's the cost recovery ratio, you see that we're at 2.09 for the year. We're essentially bringing in 2 times the income that our current operation has the expenses for. So we are doing quite well in terms of construction activity, and we're trying to ramp up some of our staffing to keep pace with it.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes.
I know approximately a year ago the hours were changed for building and safety.
Counter hours?
Yeah, the counter hours to 12 o'clock and then appointments in the afternoon.
Correct.
How
That
is
was
that-
actually done about a year and a half ago as a result of loss of staff, and it's been working fairly well. We're taking, I should point out, the on the building activity report, we have our customer count at the very bottom of the page. And for the December year to date, we handled 18,483 customers within that public counter hours. Previous year to date was 11,743.
See, at the bottom right there. Yeah.
Correct. So we're able to handle them in a very concentrated time period, allowing staff time in the afternoon to handle phone calls and other administrative tasks that are necessary to maintain the function of building and safety operation.
So the intention is still to keep the same counter hours and not to extend them to afternoon hours?
At this point, because of staffing levels, the intention is to maintain those same hours.
And did you mention that we had more, you added more staff?
We're attempting to.
You're attempting to, I see.
Yes, we have not added them yet.
Is there a differentiation between apartment units and condominium units?
No,
Or-
not in terms of this report, I should say.
Okay. Is building department pretty self-sufficient these days, or are you still contracting out for plan checking and stuff?
We're contracting out some of our mid-sized projects, and in this last year, we've also contracted out some of our mechanical and electrical plan review in order to keep pace with the amount of construction that's coming through on these very large projects. Currently, we have 4 of 8 plan check positions vacant. We have had 3 of 11 inspection positions vacant. One of the difficulties that we have with the current benefit package that the City of Glendale offers, we've been unable to attract candidates. We've done a number of recruitments. At the conclusion of the recruitment, we've offered the top candidates top step, and they've turned us down because of our benefit package. we're having a very difficult time finding qualified applicants to fill these vacancies.
Yeah, that is very true, and I'm not surprised to hear that. We faced a similar situation, but isn't that an indication that perhaps this city should consider doing something about the benefit package or the salaries or whatnot to attract those qualified people?
That's something that is under discussion. The division head of Community Development Department is working with City Manager's office to address some of these issues.
Very good. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Did you want to make a motion for adjournment?
Is a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, John.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Okay.